The year is 539 BC. Babylon is the greatest city on earth. Nearly 300,000 people live behind walls so thick that chariots race along their tops. The Ishtar Gate blazes blue and gold under the Mesopotamian sun. Ziggurat towers pierce the sky. The Euphrates River cuts straight through the city's heart, and on its banks, merchants from Egypt, India, and Anatolia trade silver and spice. This is the center of the known world. Nothing built by human hands compares. Yet to Nabonidus, the king feasting inside his palace tonight, the danger remains invisible. His priests are angry, his army is uncertain, his god has been abandoned. And on this single October night in 539 BC, the mightiest city ever built is walking toward its end. We recreate this world using AI to help you step inside Babylon as it truly was. Stay until the end to witness how one night of hubris and betrayal brings an empire of centuries crashing down. Before we arrive at that final October night, it helps to understand what Babylon actually was. Not the name, not the legend, but the living, breathing city that had stood for nearly 2,000 years before 539 BC. Imagine standing at the city's outer walls. They are not walls in any ordinary sense. Herodotus describes them as roughly 56 miles in circumference, wide enough at the top for two four-horse chariots to pass each other without touching. Double-layered, reinforced with towers every 60 feet. A moat beyond that. Babylon was not merely defended, it was designed to be unconquerable. Step inside those walls. The city is divided by the Euphrates River running north to south. On the eastern bank stands the palace district, the temples, the administrative heart of empire. On the western bank, residential quarters spread outward in a vast organized grid. Streets are straight. Drainage channels run beneath stone pavements. This is a city of deliberate engineering. Picture the processional way, the grand avenue that cuts northward through the city toward the Ishtar Gate. The road is paved with limestone and red breccia. On festival days, the statue of Marduk, chief god of Babylon, is carried in procession along this very street while thousands gather to watch. The Ishtar Gate stands at its northern end, 40 feet high, faced with brilliant blue glazed brick, decorated with rows of bulls and dragons in gold and white. Walk through it, and you understand. Immediately that you are entering somewhere sacred. At this time, the mid-6th century BC, Babylon is the capital of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. This empire stretches from modern-day Syria to the Persian Gulf. It controls the trade routes of the ancient Near East. It has already destroyed Jerusalem, deported entire peoples, and absorbed the cultural wealth of a dozen civilizations. The empire was built largely by one man, Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled from 605 to 562 BC and transformed Babylon into the city the world now knows. Under his reign, the great palaces were expanded. The Ishtar Gate was rebuilt in its full glory, and the famous Hanging Gardens, if they existed as described, were constructed near the royal palace. But Nebuchadnezzar has been dead for more than 20 years by 539 BC, and the men who followed him, 4 kings in rapid succession, murdered or deposed, have slowly weakened what he built. By this point, one man sits on the throne, Nabonidus. And understanding Nabonidus is essential to understanding what happens next. Let's begin with who Nabonidus actually was, because he is one of the strangest rulers in ancient history, and his strangeness is precisely what opens the door to Babylon's fall. Nabonidus came to power in 556 BC, not through royal blood, but through a coup supported by the army. He was not of the traditional Babylonian ruling family. From the very beginning, his claim to legitimacy was fragile. What made him truly unusual, however, was his religion. in a city whose entire identity was built around the worship of Marduk, the supreme god, the patron of Babylon, the divine force behind the empire. Nabonidus chose to elevate a different god entirely, Sin, the moon deity, whose main cult center was in the city of Haran, far to the northwest. Imagine being a priest of Marduk in this period. Your temple has stood for centuries. Your god is the center of Babylonian life. The Great New Year festival, the Akitu, in which the king ceremonially takes the hand of Marduk's statue to renew his divine mandate. That festival is the most sacred event in the Babylonian calendar. Without it, the king's legitimacy is in question. Nabonidus cancels the Akitu festival. Not once. Repeatedly. He then does something that stuns the priesthood and the people. He leaves Babylon entirely. Around 553 BC, he travels to the oasis city of Timah in Arabia, hundreds of miles from his capital, and stays there for roughly 10 years. He leaves his son Belshazzar as regent in Babylon, but he himself is absent, worshipping Sin, conducting strange rituals disconnected from the empire he rules. The Babylonian priesthood turns against him. The verse account of Nabonidus, a document composed under Persian influence but reflecting genuine Babylonian grievance, Inu describes him as a madman who disrupted the proper order of the gods. From here, we need to move our gaze eastward, to the mountains of Persia, where a man named Cyrus II is rising. Cyrus was king of the small Persian kingdom of Anshan. By 550 BC, he had conquered the Medes, absorbing their vast empire. By 547, he had defeated Lydia and its fabulously wealthy king, Croesus. His expansion is methodical, brilliant, and relentless, but Cyrus is no ordinary conqueror. He has a strategy more powerful than any army. He presents himself not as an invader, but as a liberator. Where other kings humiliate conquered peoples and destroy their temples, Cyrus restores them. He returns exiled gods to their cities. He honors local priests. He presents his victories as the will of the gods themselves, whatever gods the conquered people happen to worship. When Cyrus turns his attention to Babylon around 540 BC, he does not need to break the city from outside. The city is already breaking from within. The priests of Marduk are ready to welcome him. And in the Cyrus Cylinder, a clay document written after the conquest, Cyrus will later claim that Marduk himself chose him to restore Babylon. By 539 BC, Cyrus's army has massed near the Tigris River. Nabonidus, finally returned to Babylon, faces the threat he has spent years ignoring. He collects the statues of gods from surrounding cities, bringing them into Babylon for protection, an act that only deepens the anger of the priests who see him disrupting the sacred order yet again. The stage is set. The city stands intact, impregnable in stone and mortar. But its soul has already been surrendered. Picture the month of October, 539 BC. The Persian army has crossed into Babylonian territory and is advancing south. Nabonidus sends his forces out to meet them at the city of Opis, on the Tigris River, north of Babylon. The battle at Opis is brief and catastrophic for Babylon. The Persian forces, hardened by a decade of continuous campaigning across the Near East, overwhelm the Babylonian army. The Nabonidus Chronicle, a Babylonian administrative document, cold and factual in its language, records the defeat with chilling simplicity. Nabonidus flees. Sippar, a major Babylonian city to the north of the capital, falls without resistance on the 14th of Tishri, roughly October 10th by our calendar. Not a battle, not a siege. The gates simply open. 2 days later, on the 16th of Tishri, the Persian general Ugbaru enters Babylon itself. Think about what that means. 2 days after Sippar, the outer shield, falls, the greatest fortified city in the ancient world is taken. No prolonged siege, no battering rams against the great walls, no years of starvation. Babylon falls in a matter of days, and the walls, those impossible walls, are never even tested. How? Herodotus, writing more than a century later, offers one explanation that has fascinated historians ever since. He claims that Cyrus diverted the Euphrates River, channeling its waters into an artificial basin or canal system, and that Persian soldiers waded into the city along the riverbed during a night when the Babylonians were feasting, distracted by a great festival. Imagine being a Persian soldier wading through the shallowed river in darkness, sandals on wet riverbed stone, weapons raised. The torchlit towers of Babylon rising ahead, the sounds of celebration drifting from inside the walls, no alarm, no arrows from the towers, just the quiet city, its gates along the river unguarded or held open by those already sympathetic to Cyrus. The historical debate continues about the exact mechanism: river diversion, open gates, complicit priests, but the sources converge on one essential truth. The interior of Babylon offered no serious resistance. The Nabonidus Chronicle records, the troops of Cyrus entered Babylon without battle. The word "without battle" stands there in the cuneiform like a verdict on everything Nabonidus had failed to do. Inside the palace, it is said, a feast is underway. Later traditions, including the Book of Daniel, written centuries after the event, describe the regent Belshazzar feasting with his nobles, drinking from golden vessels taken from the temple in Jerusalem. When mysterious writing appears on the wall, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Uparsin, weighed, measured, found wanting. Whether that specific moment is historical or parable, it captures something real. The Babylonian court did not see what was coming, or chose not to see it. Ugbaru's forces spread through the city. The Babylonian Chronicle notes that there was no looting. The city was not sacked. The temples were not burned. The people were not massacred. This is entirely intentional. Cyrus has ordered restraint. He wants Babylon intact. He wants its priests grateful. He wants its people to see him as a savior, not a conqueror. Nabonidus is captured shortly after. The Chronicle records his arrest, and is later exiled rather than executed. A deliberate act of mercy that reinforces Cyrus's image as a just king. 3 weeks later, on the 3rd of Marchavan, roughly late October, Cyrus himself enters Babylon in a formal procession. He does not come as a warrior in battle formation. He walks the processional way in the manner of a Babylonian king. He is welcomed by the priesthood of Marduk. Green branches are spread before him. I can't help but picture that procession. Cyrus walking the same blue-bricked avenue where Babylonian kings had carried Marduk's statue for generations. The same Ishtar gate overhead. The same crowd lining the road. Except now, they are cheering a Persian. The empire has changed hands, and the city has barely noticed. Cyrus enters the palace. He takes the hands of Marduk's statue, the sacred ritual that Nabonidus had abandoned for years, and in doing so becomes the legitimate king of Babylon in the eyes of its own priests and its own gods. The greatest city in the world has fallen. It has fallen not to fire or siege or famine, but to emptiness. The emptiness of a king who abandoned his people's gods, and a people who had nothing left to fight for. In the weeks and months that follow Cyrus's entry into Babylon, something remarkable happens. The city continues. Markets reopen. Temples function. The administrative machinery of the empire, scribes, tax collectors, grain distributors, resumes its work, now reporting to Persian overseers instead of Babylonian ones. For the average resident of Babylon, daily life in late 539 BC looks much the same as it did before. That was the point. What had once been the capital of an independent Babylonian empire now became the western administrative center of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, and Cyrus treated it accordingly. He did not strip the city. He did not exile its elite. He absorbed Babylon into his empire the way a river absorbs a tributary, letting it flow while redirecting its course. The Cyrus cylinder, inscribed in Babylonian cuneiform and written in the voice of Marduk's chosen king, records what Cyrus does next. He orders the return of divine statues that Nabonidus had collected from surrounding cities, sending the gods home. He announces that the peoples displaced by Babylonian imperial policy, including the Jews deported by Nebuchadnezzar decades earlier, are free to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. Picture what that decree means to a Jewish family who has lived in Babylon for 2 generations, who has never seen Jerusalem, who grew up hearing their grandparents describe the temple that was burned and the life that was taken away. Cyrus's proclamation does not merely change political borders, it reshapes the lives of tens of thousands of people across the Near East. Within Babylon itself, the priesthood of Marduk finds its position restored and strengthened. The Akitu festival resumes. The religious calendar that Nabonidus had disrupted is reinstated. In the eyes of the priests, the right order of the cosmos has been restored, and it was a Persian king who restored it. Ugbaru, the general who led the initial entry into Babylon, dies shortly after the conquest. The chronicle notes his death with the same flat tone it uses for everything, a single line. The bureaucracy moves on. Nabonidus, in exile, disappears from the major historical record. So the last Babylonian king ends not in battle or execution, but in obscurity. A fitting conclusion for a man who was absent from his own empire for a decade. By the final years of the 6th century BC, Babylon occupies a unique and paradoxical position within the Persian Empire. It is simultaneously conquered and indispensable. Cyrus and his successors, Cambyses, then Darius I, all take the title King of Babylon alongside their Persian titles. They maintain the temples. They fund the ziggurats. They speak the language of Marduk. To rule the ancient world credibly, you had to hold Babylon. And to hold Babylon, you had to honor what Babylon was. Darius I, after suppressing a Babylonian revolt around 522 BC, rebuilds damaged temples and reaffirms the city's administrative importance. Babylon becomes one of the 4 royal capitals of the Achaemenid Empire, alongside Persepolis, Susa, and Ecbatana. The city is not diminished. It is incorporated. The fall of 539 BC reshapes the entire Near East. The last great Semitic empire of Mesopotamia, the Neo-Babylonian state that had destroyed Jerusalem, humbled Egypt, and dominated the region for 70 years, is gone. In its place, the Persian Empire stretches from the Aegean coast to the borders of India, the largest empire the world had yet seen. And Babylon is its jewel. For the Jewish community, the consequences are immediate and profound. The permission granted by Cyrus begins a long process of return, not all at once, not simply but gradually, group by group, over decades. The memory of Babylon, the rivers, the captivity, the strange land, will remain embedded in Jewish scripture and consciousness long after the political reality is changed. And the city itself? It continues to stand. It continues to be Babylon. Traders still walk its markets. Priests still tend its temples. The blue bricks of the Ishtar Gate still glow in the Mesopotamian morning. The walls that no army breached still rise against the horizon. The city that fell without a battle is still, in every visible sense, the greatest city on earth. It fell, and it endured. And that contradiction is the most Babylonian thing of all.